What is your biggest weakness? We've all been there. Anyone who's ever applied for a job probably has had to contend with this dreaded question. We all know the score. Telling the truth could risk exposing a flaw of yours to the interviewer that they may not have picked up on, and as such sabotaging your success after working so hard to attain the interview in the first place. So the answer really should be something that is seen as a strength rather than a weakness. If you're like most people, you would have said perfectionism, because here you are, this candidate whose biggest weakness is that they work so hard and they try so hard and they want to do the best they can. Isn't that the perfect answer and exactly what a potential employer might want? Perfectionism is something we collectively tend to view in society as a strength, since perfect means no notes. Perfect means it can't be any better. Perfectionism, perfect. The only way to attain this ideal of perfect is through being hard on ourselves, not letting ourselves be second best, not handing in or finishing anything until we know that there is nothing it can be improved on. Perfectionism is usually disguised as the noble pursuit towards perfection. You want to do your best, right? Essentially, perfectionism is what leads to perfect, right? Perfectionism is really just procrastination in disguise. And this is where the misrepresentation of perfectionism trips people up, making it seem more glamorous and something to aspire to, hiding the reality of it being far more sinister and debilitating than its name suggests. Perhaps if we termed it detail paralysis or endless refinement syndrome, it would no longer look like something to aspire to. Just a thought. A second way in which perfectionism can trip people up is that perfectionists tend to evaluate their behavior overly critical, in which, in addition to the aforementioned procrastination, can lead to outcomes such as inability to finish a task, difficulty to start it, lack of practice, because practice, by its very nature, means you're not perfect, so you're going to have to fail. So if you only want to do it when you're perfect, well, how can you practice for it? There's a very famous parable where a pottery teacher announced on the opening day that he was dividing the class into two groups. All those on the left side of the studio will be graded solely on the quantity of work they did. All those on the right solely on the quality. His procedure was simple. On the final day of class, he would bring in the bathroom scales and weigh the work of the quantity group. 50 pounds of pots was rated an A, 40 a B, and so on. Those being graded on quality, however, needed to produce only one pot. It was going to be the perfect one to get an A. Well, grading time came, and the curious fact emerged. The pottery works of highest quality were in the quantity group, not the quality group. It seemed that while the quantity group was busy churning out pots and learning and improving and failing, the quality group had set to theorize what a perfect pot is, and in the end had little to show for their efforts more than grandiose theories and ideas of what a perfect pot is, as well as some dead clay. We see this in real life as well. No matter what your opinion of her, you cannot deny Taylor Swift's insane amount of success. Whereas when you think of Guns N' Roses, do you really think of Chinese Democracy? The album that took 8 years to complete, which from various factors, among which perfectionism. At this juncture, I think it's important to say that perfectionism might be something that you have to contend with your whole life, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doomed. You can learn to manage it though. So start before you're ready. You're never going to feel ready, and the more you value and place importance on whatever thing you are doing, the harder it's going to be to feel ever ready. The brilliant book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, speaks to this idea about not waiting for the ideal time to feel something to do it. You just start. There's a Chinese proverb which speaks to this very well. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Right, rather than perfect. It's just, we should all just be aiming for good enough sometimes. A third way perfectionism sabotages people is essentially it is fear of failure, fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, and fear of being judged by yourself, because your own self-worth is contingent on performing perfectly. As J.K. Rowling, whatever your opinions of her are, she says it's impossible to live without failing, at something unless you live so cautiously you may as well not have lived at all, in which cases you fail by default. Now, whatever you think about her political views cannot take away from the fact that she is phenomenally successful, so she might have a point or two. Failure is actually the only way you'll ever learn. In Matthew Syed's seminal book, Black Box Thinking, he contrasts two industries with very different attitudes to failure, the aviation industry and the healthcare industry in the UK. He illustrates that only through examining and confronting and embracing failure, learning from it, taking feedback, can we actually achieve success. He argues that every modern improvement in the aviation system, in the aviation industry, is built on the back of failure. So think about that. The expensive lessons we've learned, the cost of people's lives, have only served to improve the aviation industry. It was only through failure that anything could be improved. He says, everything we know in aviation, every rule in the book, every procedure we know because somebody died. We have purchased at a great cost lessons literally bought by blood. We have to preserve its institutional knowledge and pass on to succeeding generations. We cannot have the moral failure of forgetting these lessons and having to relearn them. The only way to succeed is through failure. The only way through fail is through trying. If you're too scared to even try for fear of failure, you may never give yourself the opportunity to look back and improve. Chasing perfection will not shield you from failure. It will only shield you from improvement. So my tip here would be to chase improvement, just one little bit at a time, rather than chasing perfection. You start something, anything. You look at it, you analyze how you did it, and you improve by a tiny bit, knowing full well the second time you're going to make mistakes, the third time you're going to make mistakes, the 17th time you're going to make mistakes. One tiny little improvement at a time, and that's all you can hope for. Black and white thinking, or all or nothing mindset, whereby your work is either perfect or a total disaster, is what trips people up. So if you start to see in shades of grey, my work was wrong in these areas but right in these areas, and not see it as a reflection of yourself. I am not a failure because I failed. There is a distinction between who you are as a person and your output. Burnout is another factor at play which serves to undermine people with perfectionism's ability to actually produce anything. I used to want my essays at uni to be perfect, so I'd spend forever fine-combing through each sentence to make sure each sentence was just right. There was no extra word that didn't need to be. This would take such a long time, and the deadline would be there, and I wouldn't have written the final paragraph, the conclusion. As such, my essay would be as a piece, as a whole, less than stellar, because the essay, the last final paragraph was just cobbled together, whatever, and that dragged down the whole essay. There were large gaps, hastily written. So this is when we get too much in the weeds and focus on the minutiae and lose the big picture. Furthermore, we experience burnout. We've been working so hard that at the end we're just like, I can't do this anymore, and rush the rest. And the end result, a failing grade for me. So set realistic expectations. You can't edit an empty page. First write your first draft and then go and edit. Give yourself space to come back to it. Just get it out the first time in all its ugly glory detail. It's okay to have many drafts. You don't have to do the first thing as perfect. That's why they're called drafts. And it's highly unlikely that the first draft you write will be perfect. So you can let yourself off the hook there. Again, J.K. Rowling rewrote the opening chapter of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone more than 15 times. Do you think that if she had wanted it to be perfect from the first time, we would have the phenomenon that is Harry Potter today? Think about it. The director David Fincher is also known for doing up to 100 takes and has produced some of the best movies, among them Fight Club, Gone Girl, The Social Network, just to name a few. Perfectionism leads to wasted opportunities. While you're so busy tweaking and editing your application for a job, the deadline has passed. While you're obsessing over perfected one thing, the world keeps moving. It doesn't wait for you. Opportunities don't wait for you to produce a perfect product. Sometimes good enough is good enough, and you just have to take the moment. So I hope this helps you. I would advise you to start small, celebrate progress, not perfection, And remember, every expert was once a beginner who dared to try, fail, and learn. The bad news is you're never going to be perfect, no matter how hard you try. The good news, you're never going to be perfect. So you may as well try and fail and accept that you were never going to be perfect anyway. If this resonated with you in any sense, then please let me know, write a comment, just tell me your story. I'd be very interested. I've struggled with perfectionism my whole life, and I still do to this day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next